faculty teaching in an environment need allies of each other too. It's not just being an ally to the students, it's being an ally to each other. So, a couple characteristics of allies, and then after I take the first couple, then I'm going to put you to work. So the easy ones are the first two. Allies are people who feel good about their own social group membership and comfortable and proud of their own identity. In other words, you can't be an ally if you're ashamed of who you are. You have to be confident in who you are and comfortable with who you are in order to be an ally of other people. And allies take responsibility for learning about the targeted group's heritage, culture, and experiences, and how oppression works in everyday life. We sort of did a little bit of that with the Opportunity Walk, how some people have had opportunities and other people haven't. I think I heard you guys discussing earlier transitions, that some of us have had very fortunate transitions and some of them with less fortunate transitions. For example, I graduated from my doctorate from Carnegie Mellon University, which is a private, prestigious college. I could have never gotten there. I went to a state school. I became a teacher in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. There was a little program there to teach teachers in the summer how to be better teachers of economics. And I got recruited, and somebody had a scholarship, and it was luck that got me through, and how much it's changed my life. I mean, I was nothing wrong with being a teacher in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but being a college professor in Sacramento is a lot easier and nicer, and besides, it's not cold in the winter. So oppression and opportunity is available in everyday life. What I'd like you to do now is, let's see, how many think we got? We have about, how many things are on this list? I can't scroll. About 12. So what I'd like you to do is in groups of 3, like you 3 are a group, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I may run out of numbers here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And you 2. What would I like you to do? I would like you to look at these categories. And for example, this group, I'd like you to take the next one. Listens and respects the perspectives and experience of targeted group members. And I'd like you to discuss that and figure out how to explain it to the rest of the group. You're going to do research for the rest of the group. You're going to use your knowledge about that one. And your task in 7 minutes is going to be to say, this is how you do that, okay? And you 3, take the next one. Acknowledges unearned privileges received as a result of advantage status and works to eliminate or change them into opportunities, rights that the targeted group might also enjoy. So think it through, talk with each other, learn from each other, but your task is how you're going to explain that, the importance of that ally relationship to the rest of the group. And you 3 have the next one. Recognizes unlearning oppressive beliefs and actions is a lifelong process, not a single event, and welcomes that as an opportunity. You started. So work on that. You're going to explain it to all of us. You 3 are willing to take risks, try new behaviors, and act in spite of their own fear and resistance. So why is that important? You're going to explain it to us. And 3, you're going to take care to avoid burnout. And why is that important?
I'm sure each other's names again.
It's in your own self-interest.
Not just very good. Win my
It's in your own self-interest. Willing to make mistakes, willing to be confronted about your own behavior.
This one's gonna apply to me because I'm walking in something. I don't know what I meant.
So what you did is you did your research for each other. That's the whole purpose of this is do your work for each other. So this group, explain to the larger group what's important in your. Yours was what? Listen to the respects of what did you have? Listen to the respects of experience of targeted group members. What did you have? What did you?
So we discussed the difficulty of laying out some of the privileges that you have to actually think about people who are underprivileged, people who don't have those privileges. A simple example that we took is, and kind of linking it to what we were saying between Latino born here and Latino born in South America, we're discussing the experience of African American born here and African American born on the continent. And why there were other issues. Personally, when I came here, I didn't understand why African American were not taking advantage of all the opportunity around. It took me some time to understand it because I was coming from a poor country where we didn't have a lab, and we still studied stuff, doing this mental experiment when we didn't have an actual lab. But we were discussing that it takes time to understand that I grew up in a society where my doctor was black, the pilot was black, the president was black, and so I never had somebody who tell me in school, oh, you cannot do it, or as Makiba was saying, your name doesn't sound, I don't want to say your name because I'm not sure I can say it, or it sounds weird. So overall, the idea is if you're part of a privileged group, it takes some, for some people, probably takes some convincing, for some, it's natural to be an ally and speak to other people, but it's not as simple. And a privileged group is not always what we think privileged.
So your group, what do you want to teach everybody else about your room?
So we had acknowledged as underprivileged and received as a result of advanced status. I was just reading, but you guys can read. So what we discussed is that being like acknowledging unearned privilege, right, and realizing that all of us kind of have an unearned privilege, and knowing that just because we have one privilege or we are not privileged in another area doesn't give us the right to tell somebody, I understand what you're going through. Because if we haven't experienced that specific thing, we don't know. And so one thing that we talked about is making sure that we allow our students to really know that we are resources and we all have some knowledge, even if I may not have all of the knowledge, but maybe I know somebody else who has a little bit more of knowledge, so being able to create that network. The other thing that we talked about was the fact that when I went to a conference done by Dr. Bettina Love, and she talked about how in North Carolina, when the riots were happening, the community came together and decided that the Confederate flag needed to come down off the flagpole. And so they decided that it was an African-American woman who scaled the flagpole and brought down the Confederate flag. And so they taught her how to scale the flagpole, and they got her to scale it. And so when the police arrived, they told her to come down and to leave the flag there. And when she refused, they told her that they were going to electrocute the pole. And the man that was with her was a white man, and he stepped over the railing where the flagpole was, and he touched the pole and said, if you electrocute her, you are electrocuting me. And him just touching the pole stopped her from getting electrocuted. And so he flat out used his white male privilege to save her and allow her, I mean, they both ended up getting arrested, but at least she got down safely and wasn't electrocuted off the pole. And so what Brian brought up is, obviously he's also a white male, and he's saying like, coming in from like a stance of like, oh, let me save you with my white privilege, right? And I actually never thought about that from that perspective. And then him just being like, no, I'm standing with you. Like, I'm not trying to save you, I am standing with you. So that's kind of where.
In this group, what would you teach the rest of us about your idea?
Well, we had a lot of conversation about it. I guess.
Which one was it?
that recognizes that unlearning repressive beliefs and actions is a
Okay.
lifelong process. Welcome to each learning opportunity. The things that I personally jotted down based on our conversation were that, well, really that as white people, it's easy to do exercises like this and be like, yep, white privilege is real. And to feel guilt and shame about it, whether you call it opportunity or to call it privilege, but as white people, it is, I think, our responsibility not to like shut down and shut down our voices, but to leverage our white privilege, stand by with our white privilege, and be allies. And because to shut down our voices is kind of an oppressive action in itself, I would argue. And definitely another thing that came up just reading this is that it's on the oppressor to unlearn the beliefs and the actions. So the importance of the onus being on the oppressor, not on the oppressed. And yeah, just that it's a lifelong process. Like literally everything takes practice. There are a lot of norms in our society that we grow up thinking. We still largely are very heteronormative, very, sexually normative, heteronormative. There's just a lot of normativity, and unlearning normativity is a process that hopefully we can get better anyway. But yeah, just that everything takes practice and nothing happens overnight.
Thank you. This group.
Yeah, we also had a lengthy discussion, but I think just discussing about what the status quo is, hierarchies and cultural practices. Overall, just breaking from pedagogical practices and that aren't working or aren't working for our students. And just be patient in the process that we take certain risks that actually work for our students, communicate, and just work on things that will work for our students in any of our classes, or even my role as an outreach coordinator with other high schools.
Okay. In your group, you had a white burnout, wasn't it?
What kind of burnout? Avoid.
Avoid
Avoid
burnout.
burnout. Yeah. Allies have to take the time to avoid burnout. So what did you?
We talked about it from a couple of angles, and that is, we have to figure out how to be in the classroom so that we don't burn out. So, and collaboration is really important. And Dana and I were talking about our work in SESI over the past few years, and it's very intense work. It's difficult work, but we have so much support. And I certainly learned a lot of collaboration. I don't have to bear this on my own. When I see a student in trouble, I have places I can go. So I'm not going to burn out on worrying about that student. I'm going to follow through with that student and get that student's sources. And talking to people, we used to meet like once a week. Being flexible in the classroom. If something isn't working, you change it. You don't go, I have to do it this way. Don't try and control it. Just kind of feel it and learn from it and go with it, and you won't have that kind of danger. And get students' feedback, and they'll tell you, okay, so I can change that. And Dana brought up a really good point, which is the students need to know how not to burn out too, because burnout among students is really problematic. My daughter was going through that too. It's just really hard. You're seems like forever, and you have teachers you don't like and classes you don't like. It's so easy to leave. So that, I don't know if I have an answer for, but I think we have to be aware of that because they burn out too.
Just a supplement to that is, because I was at Sac State for all those years, the average student at Sac State works 30 hours a week. And so now there's a big push to graduate in 4 years. Well, the people making some of these decisions may not understand that the student is working 30 hours a week, because if you're going to graduate in 4 years, you're not going to get through that working 30 hours a week. So, and what it produces is burnout, stress, and leaving. You folks, which group did you have?
We looked at the bullet acts against social injustice because it is in her own self-interest to do so. I guess we came away primarily with a couple of things. One, for us, this point really speaks to motivation. What's our motivation? What's our personal motivation for fighting or not fighting against social injustice? And to piggyback with that, we thought about the important role that our own personal history plays in that motivation and in developing motivation. You know, maybe you were raised with parents who were socially active. Maybe you weren't. But the bottom line, I guess, is the third point, that this is asking us to take a deep dive into what's motivating us. And then once we conclude what our motivation is, whatever it might be, we are still called to do the work. Right.
And you folks?
So we have, is willing to make mistakes, learn from them, and try again, and willing to be confronted about behavior, attitudes, and consider change. So we were just talking about how to be an ally with our students, is even when we make mistakes, to really convey, to don't get embarrassed, or just say mistakes happen all the time, and sometimes they're just not really, it's not a negative thing, it's more, hey, how can we learn from this? And we were saying, both teams, we tried to do that. Okay, now that we did it wrong, we see the wrong way, okay, now let's show it the right way. And even in laboratory, sometimes you learn more when you make a mistake than if it all went smoothly. So just trying to be like, everyone makes mistakes, it's not a big deal, it's a learning process, we grow from it. And be comfortable with making mistakes. If you never try, you're never going to get anywhere, right?
Yeah, that's certainly important in the STEM field. So these are some characteristics of allies. Now, the next thing I want you to do is, with that same piece of paper, I want you to individually, I want you to select 3 characteristics of allies that you already have and exhibit. 3 of those that you're comfortable with. Yeah, I'm there with that characteristic. People to read in 30 days. That takes a lot of reading. Well, what a lot of people don't know is it's sometimes called critical theory, but Freire's work, if you read very well, we were fortunate in fact that we had Paulo Freire come and work with us for a while. But if you read very carefully and you understand it well, an amazing thing is, much of what Freire is advocating, he's borrowing from John Dewey in America. We don't know that because it passed through 40 years of confusion in between that. Not everything, but there was all these people who were excited about Freire and certainly changed education in Latin America. But he was working on some of the basic ideas of John Dewey in America. Who died back in the 50s. But the key absolute strategy for adults from critical theory is dialogue. And this is a definition of dialogue. It's sort of the opposite of it's the opposite of sort of the right answer approach to things. And there's nothing wrong with right answers when there are right answers. There's nothing wrong with you explaining what a cell is and there is an answer to what a cell is, right? Nothing wrong with right answers. But for some kinds of questions, for many kinds of questions, there aren't such finite right answers. And the way we can learn to resolve those problems is through dialogue. So dialogue is, and you have a copy of this, in dialogue, when you're having a discussion, you're looking for basic agreements, not for disagreements. So if you're having a discussion, you're looking for, what is this person saying that I agree with? And we get so much trained in our society to look for what I disagree with. You look for strengths in the other person's point of view. That is, most people, if you were discussing an issue like, how should I deal with students who don't arrive in my class on time? Most people, if you listen to other people, there is something in their point of view that may be valuable to you, because we're learning from each other. I reflect on my own position. For example, I reflect on my own position on grading or attendance. Now that's not like there's a right or right answer to that, but you should be able to reflect on your own position. I'll give you an example, a self-deprecating example. When I was teaching at Sac State one time, I thought I was being really cool at the first day of class, and I told the students, I said, look, you're adults. If you get sick, stay home. If somebody is in your family has got a health problem, don't call me and ask for permission to not come to class. Just take care of your family. I thought that was really, very nice. And a week later, a college decided said, Duane, what did you say in class? And I said, what? And he says, oh, this woman is so pissed off at you. And what it was her particular experience was that she did have someone who was homesick, and she thought I was dismissing that. She like laughing about it. And I wasn't laughing about it. But, so we should be willing to reflect on our own positions, because people may understand them differently than we do. And I consider the possibility of finding a better answer or a better solution than yours and mine. And I assume that many people have a piece of the answer. Maybe it's helpful to understand what dialogue is by looking at what it is not. And this is something that I'm sure you're familiar with. Dialogue is not when I'm in a discussion and I search for the things we disagree about. That's not dialogue, that's winning and losing. And it's okay to win and lose sometimes, but that's not the general way we learn. You know people who spend their time searching for weaknesses in your position. Their whole life is spent trying to find out what's wrong with your position. You know people who attack other people's positions, or who defend their own solution and exclude yours. So that's anti-dialogue. So, and the only reason I put up anti-dialogue is to clarify what dialogue is, because we're going to practice some dialogue in a moment. And if you have that list, I'm going to put this down, so if you have the list in front of you, it'll be helpful. Let's see if I can get it. Is that big enough? No. Somebody showed me how to power it. Can I get rid of it last time? You haven't got fish too.
So you have a copy.
We all got it, then.
So, in building community and building a community of persons working together, like the SETI group, dialogue amongst you is a really, really important task, because you don't make change alone. We totally revised what I was going to talk about today back about 6 weeks ago. But Martine asked me to talk about change, and I have had a lot of training in that. I was very fortunate. I was worked with Cesar Chavez for a while. I worked with Paulo Freire. Thought a lot about change. But at first, when I thought about, well, what would be important for this group about change, my quick reaction was to go to a power analysis form of change. Right? And I thought, no, that's not really right. If I were here trying to convince you to organize a union, then I would use a power analysis. But for your purposes, I think more important is an analysis of culture and change. And that is that a university, a community college, a SETI program has a culture, that it has rules, it has norms, it has patterns, it has interactions. It's a culture. And so the question is, how do cultures change? And I'm summarizing 60 years of research but, on how cultures change. It's in the field of anthropology. But cultures change in certain very specific times. They change when the recipients, the participants, recognize a need for change. If you don't recognize a need for change, nothing's going to change. That's sort of given for you folks because you've got this grant and the SESI grant, which is based on a need for change, right? So that was sort of assumed that there's recognized a need. We got to do something to improve the education of underrepresented minorities, particularly in the areas of STEM, right? So there's a need for change, and that's pretty well recognized. But that's not enough for change to occur. Change occurs when the participants understand the change that's being presented. Often there's people who feel a need for change, but they don't understand, what can I do different? If you don't understand what you can do different, you're not going to do things different. So first step is to understand the need for change. Second step is to understand the change as it is being proposed. And the third step is that the change leads to either more progress, more success, or less pain than doing things the way you're doing them now. So that's how cultures change. So cultures change in terms of teaching at a community college, in which if somebody proposes a change to you, it must lead to either more success in the classroom, more success with your colleagues, or less pain, less frustration, less irritation, less burnout. And so what I would like to do is the same pattern we did before, but this time using dialogue that is in your small group. I would like you to use dialogue characteristics that are listed there. And what I'd like you to, and so again, I'm going to make you do the work instead of me doing the work. I'm trying to get scroll. What's the first one say? I can't.
Draw upon the assets of diverse people and groups.
Thank you. I won't have to scroll. So your task is to figure out how to explain to the whole group how you're going to draw upon the assets of diverse people and groups. And your task is to explain to everybody how you're going to work in this program to build trust, or how we should work to build trust and personal relationships. And your task is to explain to the whole group how this group can treasure and develop cross-cultural leadership. And your task is to explain to the whole group how you're going to recognize multiple realities and identify common ground. And your task is how you're going to promote community self-determination. And your task is how you're going to fight exclusion. And what you're doing is preparing to explain to everybody else. You're doing research, because now it'll take 6 months to do all this research. And your task is be clear about how you're going to stand up against bias. So take about 7 minutes and prepare yourselves to teach each other. Please. Yeah.
One of the big things that I do in terms of long introductions is I always tell my students, my name is Carla Patricia Lanzas Rojas. I do have 4 names. They are my legal names. And I tell my students that I want to value their name. My son in kindergarten, they did this thing where they were starting to learn how to write their names, and it says, the first gift your parents ever gave you was your name. And so I tell my students that, and I said, hey, I want to value this gift. And if you decide, because of your personal choice, that you do not want to be called something, then I will respect it and I will call you whatever it is that you want. But if you decide that I cannot pronounce your name, so you want to make it easier for me, like, that is not okay. like, let me struggle and let me figure out how to pronounce your name. And so I really try to hone that in with my students because I want to acknowledge them for their identity and for how that they want to be perceived. I recently found out about a video called Facundo the Great, and so I'm actually going to start showing that. It's like a 1-minute clip on YouTube. It's animated, and it talks about how predominantly Latinx students come into the U.S. and their names are changed. So like Maria becomes Mary. And then all of a sudden there's this little kid that comes in and his name is Facundo, and then the staff goes in and they have like this crazy meeting. They're like, what do we do? What do we do with his name? They're like, we can shorten it. You know, we can shorten it in FABC. But that's fuck. We can't say that, that's inappropriate. And so then he became known as Facundo the Great because he was the kid whose name could not be changed. And so just in terms of reinforcing this whole identity piece of our students, right? And I really want to bring that in. The other thing, I think that we should always give credit where credit is due, so this credit goes and shout out to Rosalinda. In terms of going back to that class piece, and just basic needs, so on my syllabus, I totally flat out went on the Ceci canvas and I stole her back page of the syllabus, and it literally says, know where you can find support this semester, and the very first bullet, food, housing, and other basic needs. And I took that all from her, like it talks about the RISE weekly food distribution, community of care, GSPS, and then I added some other things just in terms of CalWorks and the Student Emergency Fund. But I wanted it to be front and center. The first thing that students see is like, hey, yes, we're gonna be in my class, we're gonna be learning math, but it doesn't matter, I can be the best teacher in the world. You are not gonna learn if you are hungry, if you are thinking about where you're gonna sleep tonight, you know, and we need to address these issues before we can talk about the content. So I think all of those pieces, right, talk about really building trust, personal relationships across all those boundaries. And then the very last piece I'm going to talk about is, for those of you who were in this cohort before, you know that I did contract grading last semester, and in order to get an A in my class, you had to give back to the class as a community. And what was really great about that is that I built an environment where students didn't feel like it wasn't just trust with me. I had a student one day in class that she had a question on something I just covered, it was during break, and instead of coming to me and asking me a question, she literally stood up, turned around, and said, where's my community at? I need help. And so being able to be vulnerable in a classroom where you can ask your other colleagues for help is crucial as well. So just think about different ways where we can kind of bring that community aspect, that cultura aspect into our classroom. I think would be nice. That's all.
Very good. You folks. Treasure and develop cross-cultural leadership.
Also the speaker. The spokesperson. We were just talking a lot about sort of questioning, changing, challenging the ways that we interact with each other and the capacities in which we interact with each other and the spaces in which we interact with each other, and that maybe sometimes having a meeting is like the best way to hear each other's voices, but sometimes happy hour might be the best way to hear each other's voices and to sort of break down the hierarchical structures that we mentally exist in or financially exist in or whatever it is, and just putting everyone on the same page and building relationships that way. So there's an element of building trust and personal relationships in that as well, so kind of 2 and 3. But also just recognizing that when we get to know each other as human beings and we recognize and like respect the fundamental humanity in each other, there are much deeper ways that we can collaborate and communicate with each other.
Okay. You guys, your group?
So we talked about a lot of the issues concerning multiple realities in the first, and after a long discussion, a dialogue. But the first thing that came out of my mind was Tarayoso's community cultural wealth, and just how we can get our students' talents, strengths, experiences, backgrounds, and environments, and get that as a capital, and inspire them, use their linguistic abilities, their familial experiences, their social navigation, and also forms of resistance, and be able to apply those in the classroom. Learn from them.
Goes back to those long introductions and the acknowledgement that everybody brings success into that classroom, that common space, from a lot of different places, and those are all assets. They're all assets for the individual students, and then if you build that community inside the classroom, they're assets for each other.
It's just a sideline, it really worried me when I saw your description of the program and it said long introductions, because I'm very familiar with long introductions. We did it for 25 years in our program, and I thought they were super important. Then I saw all these names of people, and I said, well, wait a minute, people are supposed to be introducing themselves. So I was concerned that long introductions didn't mean what I thought long introductions did. And then when you told me what you did, okay, now I feel more comfortable. Next group. What did you have? Promotes community self-determination? What did you have?
Well, we had a couple different ideas.
Okay.
Okay. And because I'm from CTE, my idea is that we go out to the community groups, and we have to develop a trust with them, which is really important. And probably more than trust, we have to develop sincerity, that we truly believe in what we're saying. And then we let them know what Sacramento City College has to offer to their community. And then they can go out and they can tell individual members within the community, but just develop this pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you know, and for me, there's a lot of people out in our community who can make really, really good money, but they just don't know about it. Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of barriers that prevent them from coming and learning about it. And I think it's incumbent upon us to break down those barriers and open the doors and let them have another decision.
I just wanted to add I think because I teach a lot of assessing students, for me, I know they've come there as kind of a huge next step for themselves, their family, and their community. And so what I like to do is, and going back to the cultural capital thing, is help them realize they bring so much of their community or knowledge with them, and then kind of encourage them to give voice to that community. They are giving voice to that community, help them understand that. And they all know that, you know, that they're the first in their family or they're models, cousins. So it's the students who are going to go back to the community and bring people with them. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to help.
And you guys have
Number
fight
6.
exclusion.
Yeah, fighting exclusion. So we dialogue that the way to fight exclusion is to include. And I don't mean that in a simplistic way. But we talked about a tangible example of doing so would be a couple semesters. I started letting the students be in charge of a couple of really important parts of my syllabus, and so therefore my curriculum. For example, with the mantra that I'm not working for my students to respect me, I'm working for my students to trust me. So in doing so, I decided to let them be the policymakers when it came to attendance, when it comes to attendance. So a couple of semesters ago, I thought, ooh, this is kind of risky, especially knowing my temperament, right? But I thought, no, I'm going to let them. So they devised the attendance policy, and they devised the late assignment policy. And a couple of things, one somewhat comical, they were more strict, right? They were more strict than I was being, and more strict than I am. But what I really liked about it is they were accountable for, lack of a better word, enforcing that policy. So one of the tangible things we did is everyone, probably like many of you do, the students exchange contact information and specifically their phone numbers. So they enforce the policy by texting each other, because I asked them questions when they instituted and when they devised this attendance policy and the late assignments. I said, well, let's just say this happens, you know. So they thought 2 absences, that was reasonable. okay, well, what if, you know, your colleague and your classmate has a family emergency and that person has already used their tube? What are we gonna do then? And I always said, what are we gonna do then? So they used the contact information and they were so religious about texting each other, right? So even at the start of class, you know, I may notice that, oh no, you know, Arturo's not here. And I would say that out loud. Oh my God, Arturo's not here, what are we gonna do? Immediately, 3 or 4 of them got on their phones and texted. Okay, where are you? You gotta come here. You know, Salazar's waiting for you, you gotta be here. I mean, it was super effective, super effective. And we did a very similar routine with the assignment policy.
And you guys had standing up against bias?
Standing up against bias, yeah. I feel fortunate in teaching statistics that I incorporate a lot of data collection things, and one of them could be having the students do an implicit bias test and then relating that to ethnicity, to do a chi-square test. And then to have reflection pieces throughout so that it's a discussion among the class, things of that nature about bias and implicit bias. We had a harder time talking about standing up against bias in terms of other faculty members, and doing so in a way that was not anti-dialogue, and keying in on the word being strategic in that through our actions, maybe by our actions in joining a PLC such as SESI or through committee memberships or Senate memberships or stuff like that. But we had a harder time in determining how to do that when it comes to other faculty and bias.
And just a small thing, don't misunderstand dialogue. It doesn't apply in all situations. In other words, if somebody is a racist asshole, you have the right to say so. You know, how does that make you feel? No, you're wrong. Okay, so you guys had draw upon diverse assets of diverse people and groups, right? So what do you tell your colleagues?
Okay, so it's supposed to be a safe space and we can admit when we don't do things perfectly. So as I was listening to my two colleagues here, I realized that part of it, drawing upon the assets of diverse people and groups, means drawing upon all of the students in the classroom and not being the person who controls everything, even though obviously we're the professor, right? So you have control over the class, but that it's okay for the students to be wrong. It's okay to let them make mistakes. I always have this thing, but I have to tell them what they need to know. But they really need this right answer right here. And then we started talking about how, well, okay, what happens when they talk and they discuss, and sure, there's mistakes and you sort of guide them along, and then they come upon it, they know a lot. They understand it a lot better than when you just talk down to them. And so I was saying I taught the color purple for about 20 years. Last semester was my last year teaching it because, anyway. Students brought up things during discussions that I had never thought of before that were just so enlightening and exciting. And I thought, okay, it's that kind of like letting go of control that then allows you to tap into the diversity of the class and really the diversity of hopefully all aspects of life. It's just letting it go and thinking this is the right way, it's the correct definition. But other things as well, just letting go and listening. Yeah.
And just to wrap up, and then to share a surprise with you, I would suggest to you that in the future, like I understand you guys meet monthly or something like that.
Yeah.
That you apply these characteristics of developing a community to the SESI project itself. It certainly applies to the students in your class. It also applies to you guys amongst yourselves. Every one of these applies to how you build how you build a community, and in your case, the necessity community. The surprise is, I've been teaching according to that clock, and the clock's off by a half hour. So it's actually time for you guys to all go to lunch. So thank you. See you again.
Duane, thank you.
See you.